The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm but deceptive glow over the small suburban neighborhood of Maplewood. Thomas Grant, a quiet man of 63, stood at the edge of his front yard, feeling the weight of the world settle heavily on his shoulders. The crisp autumn air held a certain bite, yet he felt only the dull ache of betrayal creeping into his bones. His eyes scanned the familiar contours of the house he had spent decades building, a sanctuary of memories, laughter, and the echoes of his late wife's soft voice. But today it felt like a tomb. It happened so quickly. One moment he was sorting through the remnants of their life together. The next, the door swung open, and his only son, Marcus, stormed in, flanked by two men in ill-fitting suits. Thomas's heart sank as he realized their intent, and the world around him seemed to blur. The shrill noise of the front door slamming echoed in his mind as the men began tossing his cherished photo albums out onto the front lawn, each one a fragile vessel of memories. Birthdays, anniversaries, family vacations, scattered like fallen leaves in the wind. "Dad, you need to understand. This is for the best," Marcus had said, his voice tinged with a desperation that Thomas had never heard before, one that twisted the knife deeper into his heart. How had it come to this? How had the boy he raised, the child who once marveled at the world with innocent eyes, devolved into a man willing to discard his father's history for a few quick bucks? It was as if Marcus had already given in to the darkness wrapped around him, the kind of darkness that clung to people like a suffocating shroud, the kind that drove them to make choices they would later regret. Thomas stood frozen, his heart pounding in his chest, a mix of rage and sorrow swirling within him. He could feel the sting of tears welling up, the kind of tears he had promised himself he would never shed in front of Marcus again. But he swallowed hard, forcing them back. There was no room for weakness now, not when he had already lost so much. He needed to remain strong, if not for himself, then for the memory of his wife, who had loved their son fiercely. As the last album hit the ground with a sickening thud, Thomas's mind raced. He had been preparing for this moment, the culmination of a betrayal he had sensed long before it manifested. There had been signs, small, seemingly insignificant clues that hinted at Marcus's deception. The late-night phone calls, the nervous glances, the way he avoided discussing finances. It all painted a picture of a man ensnared in something dangerous. How ironic that the son he had sacrificed so much for now stood before him like a stranger, a pawn in a game he barely understood. In that moment, a flicker of realization ignited within Thomas, a spark that had long been smothered under layers of grief and disappointment. He had been living in the shadows, allowing the circumstances of his life to dictate his worth. But no more. The photo albums were just things, after all, mere representations of a life that could be rebuilt, but the betrayal cut much deeper. It was a wound that needed careful tending, and Thomas knew he had to act. He turned away from the spectacle unfolding on his front lawn, the men laughing as they tossed aside the remnants of his past. He stepped inside the house, closing the door softly behind him, and leaned against it, allowing the familiar scent of aged wood and fading memories to envelop him. He felt the coolness of the doorknob against his palm, anchoring him to the present, reminding him of the resolve that was slowly hardening within. Sitting at his desk, Thomas gazed at the scattered papers, bills, and the remnants of his once orderly life. The clutter felt overwhelming, but amidst the chaos, he spotted a folder tucked away in the corner, a remnant of his late wife's meticulous planning. Inside lay documents he had long forgotten, a trust fund set up for Marcus, one that he had never disclosed to his son. It was modest, but it would be enough to turn the tide. He had always believed in transparency, yet now he realized that discretion was his greatest ally. The thought of using this hidden resource filled him with a sense of purpose. It wasn't just about reclaiming what was lost. It was about teaching Marcus a lesson, one he desperately needed to learn. The boy had been careless with his life, and it was time for him to face the consequences of his actions. The anger that simmered beneath the surface transformed into a cold, calculated resolve. He would file a secret lawsuit, a move that would catch Marcus off guard when he least expected it. The phone rang, jolting him from his thoughts. It was his attorney, a man who had been a trusted friend for years. "Thomas, I was just going over your accounts," he began, his voice smooth and reassuring. "I think we need to discuss your options moving forward." As they spoke, Thomas felt the pieces of his plan falling into place. Every word exchanged felt like a step closer to reclaiming his dignity. He would not let Marcus's greed dictate the narrative of his life any longer. With each passing moment, the fire of determination ignited within him, burning away the remnants of doubt and fear. When the call ended, Thomas stared out the window, watching the sun dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the yard. He could still see the albums, their pages fluttering in the wind like ghosts of memories past. But now they held a different meaning. They were not just remnants of a life stolen. They would become the catalyst for his son's awakening, a painful yet necessary lesson in respect and responsibility. With renewed clarity, Thomas set to work. The world outside faded as he immersed himself in the details of his plan, each stroke of the pen a promise to himself. He would reclaim not only his property but also his power. He would teach Marcus that every action has consequences, and sometimes the hardest lessons are the ones that shape us the most. And as the darkness fell outside, Thomas Grant felt a spark of hope flicker within him, a quiet yet defiant flame, illuminating the path ahead. The dim light of the attorney's office felt like a cocoon, wrapping around Thomas Grant as he sat across from Linda, his lawyer. The walls were lined with books, the spines of legal tomes staring down at him like silent witnesses to his plight. He had come here seeking clarity, but as he gazed at the faint dust motes dancing in the air, he felt instead like a ship lost at sea, adrift in a storm of emotions. "I think filing the lawsuit is a wise choice, Thomas," Linda said, her voice steady, cutting through the haze of his thoughts. "It's not just about the money. It's about sending a message." Thomas nodded, though the weight of her words pressed down on him. He had never envisioned himself in a position where he would be taking legal action against his own son. The idea felt as foreign as the bitter taste of betrayal that lingered on his tongue. Yet, in that moment, as the reality of his situation washed over him, he felt a flicker of determination ignite in the pit of his stomach. Marcus had crossed a line, and it was high time he learned the consequences of his actions. "I just don't understand," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "What happened to him? He used to be so full of life, so full of promise." Linda leaned back in her chair, her expression sympathetic yet firm. "Sometimes, life's burdens can change a person. You've mentioned his friends, those influences can lead to some dark paths. But you can't change him. You can only change how you respond." The words struck a chord deep within him. Thomas had spent countless nights pondering where he had gone wrong as a father. Had he been too lenient? Too harsh? The memories of Marcus as a child flooded back. His laughter, the way he would chase fireflies in their backyard during warm summer evenings, the innocent curiosity that once lit up his eyes. Those moments felt like threads unraveling from a tapestry, leaving behind a frayed and incomplete story. "I just wanted to protect him," Thomas finally said, his voice cracking. "I wanted him to have a better life than I did." "You can't protect him from himself, Thomas," Linda replied gently. "This lawsuit is about setting boundaries. It's about making him understand that his actions have repercussions, not just for you, but for him too." Taking a deep breath, Thomas straightened in his chair. He looked around the office, the books, the framed degrees hanging on the walls, and felt a rush of resolve. He would not let Marcus's choices define him. He needed to reclaim what had been lost, not just the photo albums, but his dignity, his sense of self. "Let's proceed," he said, his voice steady now. I'm ready. Days turned into weeks as Thomas immersed himself in the process. The crisp autumn air began to weave its way through Maplewood, painting the trees in fiery shades of orange and gold. The familiar scent of aged wood and fallen leaves filled his nostrils every time he stepped outside, grounding him in the present while echoing the memories he was fighting to retain. He spent his evenings sifting through the remnants of his life, piecing together what he could salvage from the wreckage Marcus had left behind. Each photo album, though discarded, was a testament to moments frozen in time. A birthday party where Marcus had laughed with his friends, family vacations that had once brimmed with joy, and quiet nights spent sharing stories. It was like flipping through pages of a cherished book, only to find that some chapters had been torn out. One evening, as he thumbed through a particularly worn album, the doorbell rang, echoing in the silence of his home. Thomas hesitated, his heart racing, unsure of who might be on the other side. He set the album down and walked to the door, the wooden floor creaking beneath his feet. When he opened it, he found Marcus standing there, a shadow of the son he once knew. His hair was disheveled, and the familiar spark in his eyes was dimmed by something darker. "Dad," he began, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "Can we talk?" Thomas's heart sank. He had dreaded this moment, yet a part of him yearned for connection, for understanding. "What is there to talk about, Marcus? You threw away my memories." "I know," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I messed up. I don't know what I was thinking."
I'm sorry.
The apology hung between them, heavy and fragile. Thomas regarded his son, searching for a glimmer of the boy he had raised. "Sorry doesn't bring back the past, Marcus. It doesn't undo what you did. I get that, but I didn't mean to hurt you. I was just what?" Thomas interrupted, frustration bubbling to the surface. "Just trying to make a quick buck? You think those albums were just things to be sold off? They were our history, our life together." Marcus flinched at the accusation, the weight of his father's disappointment settling heavily on his shoulders. "I didn't see it that way. I thought they were just old pictures." "Old pictures," Thomas echoed, a bitter taste creeping into his mouth. "They're not just pictures, Marcus. They're memories of moments that mattered. You've lost sight of what's important." The silence that followed was thick with tension, as if the very air around them had paused to absorb the gravity of their words. Thomas felt the familiar ache of loss clawing at his insides, mixing with a growing anger. He needed to remind Marcus of what he had disregarded, to help him see the value in what he had thrown away. "Do you even know what you're risking?" Thomas pressed, his voice low but firm. "You're losing your family, your connection to everything that shaped you." "I'm trying to fix this, Dad," Marcus replied, desperation creeping into his tone. "I want to make it right. I didn't mean to let you down." The plea hung in the air, and for a fleeting moment, Thomas saw the flicker of the boy he had cherished. But then reality crashed back, the looming decision weighing heavily on his heart. "You need to understand the consequences of your actions, Marcus. That's why I'm taking legal action." The words left his mouth like stones thrown into the still waters of their relationship, rippling outward and shattering any hope of reconciliation. Marcus's face fell, the color draining from his cheeks. "You're going to sue me?" "It's not about the money," Thomas said, his voice firm yet trembling with emotion. "It's about teaching you a lesson, about accountability." "I can't believe this," Marcus said, shaking his head in disbelief. "I thought you would understand. I thought you would help me, not punish me." "Help you?" Thomas exclaimed, feeling a mix of rage and sorrow. "Do you even realize how much you've hurt me? How much you've hurt yourself? This isn't just about what you did. It's about who you're becoming. This darkness isn't just a phase, Marcus. It's a path." Marcus looked away, his expression a mask of conflict. "I don't know how to change," he admitted, his voice cracking. I don't know if I even want to. The admission hung heavily in the air, a confession that cut deeper than Thomas had anticipated. As he stood on the threshold of his home, he realized that this confrontation was not just about the lawsuit or the lost memories. It was about the gaping chasm that had formed between them, threatening to swallow them both whole. Marcus, Thomas said, his voice softer now, edged with vulnerability. I want to help you, but I can't do it alone. You need to want to change. You need to fight for what matters. Tears brimmed in Marcus's eyes, and for a moment, Thomas thought he might finally break through. But then, with a sudden resolve, Marcus squared his shoulders. I can't do this, Dad. I can't fight against you. If this is how it's going to be, then maybe I don't belong here anymore. The words struck Thomas like a physical blow. Don't say that, he pleaded, desperation clawing at his throat. You are my son. You belong here with this family. We can still find a way back to each other. Maybe, Marcus said, a tremor of uncertainty lacing his voice, but not like this. With that, he turned and walked away, the autumn air swirling around him like a shroud, leaving Thomas standing alone in the doorway, a hollow echo of despair settling in his chest. The vibrant colors of the world around him seemed muted now, as if the brightness of autumn had dimmed in response to his son's retreat. In that moment, Thomas understood the true nature of loss. Not just the memories that had been discarded, but the connection he feared was slipping away, irretrievable in the face of Marcus's decisions. Yet, even amidst the shadows, a flicker of resolve remained. Thomas knew he couldn't give up on Marcus, nor could he allow himself to be swallowed by despair. This fight was not just for the past but for the future, a chance to reclaim what had been lost. As he closed the door, he took a deep breath, grounding himself in the reality of his choices. The battle was far from over, and though the path ahead was fraught with uncertainty, he was ready to face it head-on. For Marcus, for the memories, and for the hope that one day they might find their way back to each other. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across Thomas Grant's yard as he paced back and forth on the weathered wooden deck. The crisp autumn air bit at his cheeks, sharp and invigorating, but it did little to thaw the chill that had settled deep within him after Marcus walked out. The scent of damp leaves filled the air, mingling with the faint aroma of wood smoke from a neighbor's chimney, grounding him in the familiar yet deeply unsettling reality of his life. Thomas ran a hand through his thinning gray hair, his mind swirling with thoughts of the photo albums. Those albums were more than just pages filled with memories. They were a tapestry of his life, threads that connected him to moments of joy, love, and family. Each photograph was a portal to a time when laughter echoed through the halls of their home, a time when Marcus was still a boy, full of potential and light. But now, looking at the empty space on the shelf where the albums once stood, Thomas felt a gnawing emptiness, as if a part of his very soul had been discarded alongside those treasured memories. He closed his eyes, imagining the faces that smiled back at him from those pages. The toothy grin of a 5-year-old Marcus, the proud look on his wife's face during their anniversary, the holiday gatherings that had once felt so complete. He inhaled deeply, the memories flooding his senses like a bittersweet symphony, but they were quickly interrupted by the sound of his phone vibrating on the table. He picked it up, glancing at the screen to see Linda's name flashing. His attorney. She had been a steady presence, a voice of reason in this storm of emotions. Thomas? She said, her tone warm yet professional as he answered. I know things are tough right now, but I wanted to follow up on our last conversation. Have you given any more thought to the lawsuit? The weight of her question hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I have, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. But it feels too harsh. It's my son we're talking about. Sometimes, Thomas, the lessons we need to teach are the hardest to deliver, Linda replied gently. You've suffered a betrayal, and it's important to establish boundaries. What Marcus did was not just thoughtless. It was a violation of your trust. You have every right to seek accountability." Her words resonated within him, sparking a flicker of determination amidst the sorrow. "I understand," he said, his voice steadier now. "I just wish he could see how much those albums meant to me. They were our history, our family story. There's a chance this lawsuit could be a wake-up call for him. It may seem extreme, but sometimes people need to face the consequences of their actions to truly understand them," she continued. "When can we meet to discuss the details?" "Tomorrow, if that works for you," he replied, the decision starting to crystallize in his mind. "I'll prepare myself." "Good. We'll go through everything and make sure you're ready," she assured him before they hung up. As he set the phone down, Thomas felt a mix of resolve and dread. He knew he had to do something to reclaim not only his possessions but also an ounce of respect and authority in this fractured relationship. The thought of confronting Marcus again twisted like a knife in his gut, but he also felt a flicker of hope. A hope that this would lead to a turning point, a path toward healing. The next morning dawned with a muted gray sky, the clouds heavy with the promise of rain. Thomas stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie with a sense of purpose. He had never been a man who relished confrontation, but today was different. Today he was not just a father, he was a man reclaiming his dignity. He arrived at Linda's office, the air inside cool and crisp, a stark contrast to the humid weight of emotions he carried. She greeted him with a reassuring smile, her professionalism a comfort amidst the turmoil. They sat across from each other, a polished wooden table separating them, but it felt more like a barrier between his past and the uncertain future. "Let's start by outlining your goals," Linda said, her pen poised over a notepad. "What do you hope to achieve with this lawsuit?" Thomas hesitated, the words catching in his throat. "I want him to understand the impact of his actions. I want him to feel what it's like to lose something precious, something irreplaceable." The anger he had tried to suppress bubbled to the surface, raw and unfiltered. "I want him to be accountable for the pain he's caused." Linda nodded, her expression serious. "That's a powerful intention. But remember, this isn't just about punishment. It's about opening a dialogue, forcing him to confront his choices. Have you thought about what you'll say to him?" He took a deep breath, the weight of the moment settling over him. "I want him to know that I'm not doing this out of spite. I'm doing it because I care. I want him to realize that life is full of consequences, and sometimes those consequences are painful." "Good," she said, her pen scratching notes on the paper. "We'll frame your case around that. We'll show that you're seeking to restore what was lost, both material and emotional. We'll emphasize the importance of family and the lessons that come with it." As they spoke, Thomas felt a sense of clarity emerging. This wasn't just about the photo albums. It was about reconnecting with Marcus, about guiding him back to the path he had strayed from. He envisioned a future where they could sit together, perhaps over a cup of coffee, reminiscing about the past while building a new, healthier relationship. After the meeting, Thomas left the office with a newfound sense of purpose. The rain had begun to fall lightly, a gentle patter against the pavement, and he welcomed the sound, finding solace in its rhythm. He walked with determination, each step echoing his resolve. When he arrived home, the house felt eerily quiet. The silence wrapped around him like a shroud, heavy with memories and unspoken words. He moved through the rooms, his heart aching as he touched the empty shelves where the albums once stood. He could almost hear the laughter of his family, the warmth of shared stories filling the air. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden hue through the window, Thomas sat at the dining table, a blank sheet of paper before him. He was determined to write a letter to Marcus, a letter that would bridge the gap between them, a letter that would lay bare the pain he felt while also expressing the hope he clung to. "Dear Marcus," he began, his hand trembling slightly as he wrote, "I've spent a lot of time reflecting on what happened. I want you to know that I'm not angry for the sake of being angry. I'm hurt because I care about you. Those albums were a part of our family history, and losing them felt like losing a part of myself." He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle in. "I know you've been going through a difficult time, and I want to help you. I want us to find our way back to each other. This lawsuit isn't just about the albums. It's about holding you accountable for your actions and guiding you toward a better path. I hope you can understand that." As he continued to write, he poured out his heart, expressing his fears and hopes for Marcus. He wrote of love, of the importance of family, and of the lessons learned through hardship. He wanted his son to know that he was still there, still fighting for their relationship, even in the face of betrayal. As the final strokes of his pen filled the page, Thomas felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He folded the letter carefully, placing it on the table, a tangible symbol of his determination to reconnect with his son. The next few days passed in a blur. Thomas prepared for the impending lawsuit, but he also found moments to reflect on his relationship with Marcus. He thought of the boy who once looked up to him with wide-eyed admiration, the young man who had lost his way. He hoped that this journey would not only lead to the restoration of cherished memories, but also to the reclamation of their bond. On the day of the court filing, Thomas felt a mixture of anxiety and resolve. He arrived at the courthouse, the imposing structure looming above him like a monument to justice. The air was thick with anticipation, and he could feel the weight of his decision in every step he took. As he stepped into the building, he spotted Linda waiting for him, her presence a calming force amidst the chaos of his emotions. They exchanged a determined glance, and he knew in that moment that he was ready to face whatever came next. With each passing moment, he felt the walls of betrayal beginning to crack, the foundation of their relationship starting to shift. He was taking a stand not just for himself but for Marcus, hoping that this would serve as a turning point, a chance to rebuild, to heal, and to forge a new path forward together. The morning light spilled through the half-drawn curtains, casting long shadows across the cluttered living room. Dust motes danced lazily in the sunbeams, and Thomas Grant sat at the edge of his worn armchair, clutching the letter he had written to his son. The paper felt fragile in his hands, as if it might crumble under the weight of his unspoken emotions. Each word he had penned seemed to echo in his mind, a haunting reminder of the chasm that had formed between them. He glanced at the framed photographs lining the mantel, a timeline of happier days frozen in sepia tones. There was a picture of Marcus as a toddler, cheeks stuffed with cake, laughter lighting up his face. Thomas's heart tightened at the memory, a bittersweet pang of nostalgia coursing through him like a cold breeze on an autumn morning. How had they come to this? The sheer weight of loss loomed over him, suffocating and invisible, yet all too real. With a deep breath, Thomas rose from his chair, the creaking of the wood beneath him sounding like a lament. He walked to the kitchen, where the scent of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, mingling with the faint aroma of fallen leaves wafting in from outside. The world outside was alive with the sounds of autumn, leaves rustling, children laughing, and the distant hum of lawnmowers. It felt cruelly normal, a stark contrast to the tempest brewing within him. As he poured himself a cup, the steam curled up into the air, wrapping around him like a comforting embrace. He paused, staring out at the small backyard where the maple tree stood, its leaves shimmering in hues of crimson and gold. It had been a witness to countless family gatherings, a backdrop to Marcus's laughter and his own quiet reflections. Now it felt like a relic of a time that had slipped through his fingers like sand. The clatter of a newspaper landing on the porch broke his reverie. He set his coffee down and walked to the front door, opening it to find the daily news waiting at his feet. He picked it up, the weight of the world pressing against his chest. As he turned back inside, he caught sight of the empty chair at the dining table, a reminder of the meals shared, the conversations that had once flowed easily between them. His mind flickered to the meeting with Linda, his attorney, later that day. She had been a calm presence in the storm of his thoughts, guiding him toward the decision to file the lawsuit. The idea of taking legal action against his son felt like a betrayal in itself, yet it was also a necessary step toward reclaiming his dignity. Thomas knew that this was not just about the albums. It was about teaching Marcus a lesson about respect and accountability. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, each second a reminder of the inevitable confrontation ahead. Thomas took another sip of coffee, feeling the warmth spread through him, grounding him amidst the chaos of his emotions. He had to be strong, not just for himself but for Marcus too. Perhaps this was a chance to wake his son from the stupor that had clouded his judgment. As he cleaned up the kitchen, thoughts of Marcus swirled in his mind. He remembered the last time they had spoken. An argument laced with accusations and anger, words thrown like daggers between them. "You don't understand me, Dad," Marcus had shouted, his voice breaking with frustration. "You're living in the past." The memory stung, igniting a flicker of guilt within Thomas. Was he really trapped in nostalgia, unwilling to see the man Marcus had become? His heart ached at the thought, yet he refused to let that guilt consume him. He was not merely a relic of the past. He was a father who had spent years nurturing and guiding, only to see his son veer off course. He had to believe that there was still a way back, a path toward reconciliation. The doorbell rang, jolting Thomas from his thoughts. He set down the sponge and wiped his hands on a dish towel before heading to the door. When he opened it, he was greeted by Linda's warm smile. She was dressed in a tailored navy suit, her presence exuding confidence and professionalism. "Good morning, Thomas," she said, her voice steady and reassuring. "Are you ready to discuss the next steps?" He nodded, stepping aside to let her in. "As ready as I'll ever be," he replied, forcing a smile despite the nerves churning in his stomach. They settled at the dining table, the one that had seen countless meals and discussions, now transformed into a battleground for the emotional turmoil that loomed ahead. Linda pulled out a folder, its contents neatly organized and methodically laid out. "I've prepared the paperwork we'll need to file the lawsuit," she said, her tone businesslike yet empathetic. Thomas glanced at the documents, the familiar scent of aged paper mixing with the aroma of coffee still lingering in the air. "It feels surreal," he admitted, "taking my own son to court." "It's not an easy decision," Linda responded, her gaze unwavering. "But sometimes, tough love is necessary. This could be a wake-up call for Marcus." Thomas nodded again, the weight of her words sinking in. "I just hope he understands. I want him to see that this isn't just about the albums. It's about respect, about family." Linda leaned back, folding her hands in her lap. "You're doing this to teach him a lesson, but it's also a chance for you to reclaim your narrative. You've lost so much, Thomas. This is your opportunity to stand firm." He took a deep breath, the resolve building within him. He had spent too long feeling powerless, too long allowing others to dictate the course of his life. This was his moment to take control, to set boundaries that had long been violated. As they discussed the specifics of the lawsuit, the conversation flowed with a mix of strategy and emotion. Linda's expertise was a balm to his frayed nerves, and he found himself growing more confident with every passing moment. He imagined the day they would present the case, standing in the courtroom, and finally voicing his pain. The thought brought a flicker of hope, a glimmer of light piercing through the darkness that had enveloped him for far too long. After they finished reviewing the documents, Linda placed her hand on his shoulder, her touch grounding. "Remember, Thomas, this isn't just about the past. It's about paving the way for a healthier future, both for you and for Marcus. You're giving him a chance to grow." "Thank you, Linda," he said, gratitude swelling in his chest. "I appreciate your support more than I can express." She smiled warmly, standing to gather her things. "I'll file the paperwork this afternoon. Just keep your heart open, no matter how difficult this gets. You may find a way to bridge that gap." As she left, Thomas sat in the quiet aftermath, the weight of the day settling heavily on his shoulders. He glanced at the photographs on the mantel once more, the faces smiling back at him now tinged with a bittersweet ache. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the room, and he felt a resolve hardening within him. It was time to confront the truth of their fractured relationship. It was time to reclaim the narrative that had been stolen from him. With a deep breath, Thomas picked up the letter he had written to Marcus, his heart pounding in anticipation. He would send it, and with it, he would send a message. He still believed in the possibility of redemption for both himself and his son. In the quiet of his home, amidst the fading autumn light, Thomas Grant prepared to step into the unknown, ready to fight for the love he had almost lost. The morning light filtered through the curtains, casting soft shadows across the faded wallpaper of Thomas Grant's living room. He sat hunched over the kitchen table, a steaming mug of black coffee cradled between his hands. The aroma filled the air, mingling with the musty scent of old paper and memories that lingered in the house like ghosts of the past. It was a familiar comfort, a stark contrast to the turmoil that roiled within him. As he sipped, his gaze drifted to the empty chair across from him, the place where Margaret used to sit, her laughter echoing like music in his mind. He could almost hear her voice, teasing him about his propensity to dwell on things long gone. But today, dwelling was all he could do. The photo albums, those precious windows into a shared life, had been unceremoniously tossed aside like yesterday's news. He closed his eyes, trying to suppress the wave of grief that threatened to overwhelm him. The image of Marcus, flanked by those two men in suits, haunted him. They had been like vultures, circling around the carcass of his family's history, eyes sharp with greed. The betrayal cut deeper than he had anticipated. It wasn't just the albums. It was everything they represented. A lifetime of love, laughter, and lessons learned. Thomas shifted in his seat, the wooden chair creaking beneath him, a sound that echoed the weariness in his bones. He had spent the rest of the night drafting the letter to Marcus, his heart heavy with every word. It felt like a lifeline thrown into turbulent waters, hoping against hope that it would reach his son. But now, as the sun climbed higher, he wrestled with uncertainty. Was he doing the right thing? The uncomfortable silence was punctuated by the soft chime of his phone. He glanced at the screen and saw Linda's name flashing. He had asked her to meet him this morning to discuss the lawsuit, but part of him wished for another day of solitude. Another day to gather his thoughts and fortify his resolve. "Hey, Thomas." Linda's voice was warm and reassuring as he answered. "I'm just pulling into your driveway." He looked out the window, half expecting to see her bright red car rolling up the gravel path. A part of him admired her punctuality. Another part felt a twinge of anxiety at the thought of facing the reality of his decision. He put down the mug and took a deep breath, steeling himself for the discussion ahead. When Linda entered, her presence filled the room with a sense of purpose. She was dressed in a crisp navy blazer that contrasted with the faded tones of the room, bringing an air of professionalism that Thomas desperately needed. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything," she said, smiling gently. "Just the remnants of a long night," he replied, offering her a seat. "I've been thinking a lot." "I can imagine," she said, leaning forward, her expression serious. "You know this isn't an easy path. Filing a lawsuit against your own son." "I know," he interrupted, his voice firmer than he felt. "But it's necessary. I can't let this slide. He needs to understand the weight of his actions." Linda nodded, understanding flickering in her eyes. "Let's talk about what that looks like. The implications, Thomas. It's not just about the albums. It's about the relationship you have with him and how it could change forever." He ran a hand through his thinning hair, feeling the weight of her words settle on his shoulders like a heavy coat. "What if it doesn't change? What if it only drives us further apart? Then we find a way to navigate that too." Her voice was steady, a beacon in the storm brewing inside him. But before we file, I need to know you're ready for this. It's a big step. Thomas leaned back in his chair, the wood creaking beneath him again. He thought of Marcus, the way he had looked that day, disheveled and defensive, but with a flicker of remorse in his eyes. I don't want to ruin him, Linda. I want him to learn. I want him to grow. Then let's frame this in a way that emphasizes growth. It doesn't have to be punitive. It can be educational. A chance for him to reflect on what family truly means. The conversation flowed naturally, with Linda guiding him through the steps of the lawsuit, explaining the legal jargon in a way that felt almost comforting. Yet, beneath the surface of their discussion, Thomas could feel the gnawing doubts persist. After they discussed the particulars, what grounds he would file on, the potential outcomes, and the emotional toll it might take, Thomas finally found the courage to voice his fears. What if he never forgives me? Forgiveness is a two-way street, she reminded him gently. You're not the only one who needs to come to terms with this situation. Marcus has to face his choices too. He nodded, absorbing her words like a sponge, but the knot in his stomach remained. I just wish things were different. Me too, she said, her eyes softening. But sometimes, change starts with a hard truth. For both of you. As they wrapped up their meeting, Thomas felt a flicker of resolve spark within him. He wouldn't let fear dictate his actions any longer. The lawsuit would be filed and he would stand firm. This was about reclaiming not only the memories lost in the albums but also the respect that had been shattered. After Linda left, Thomas sat alone in the quiet of his home, the weight of his decision settling in the stillness. He glanced at the empty chair once more, imagining Margaret sitting there, urging him to be brave. A tear slipped down his cheek, but it was followed by a determined smile. He could almost hear her voice whispering, "You can do this, Thomas." With renewed purpose, he pulled out a blank sheet of paper and began to draft another letter, this time to himself. It would serve as a reminder of why he was taking this step, why he needed to stand firm in the face of his son's recklessness. The ink flowed smoothly across the page, each word a declaration of his resolve. Days turned into a blur of legal jargon, meetings with Linda, and sleepless nights filled with contemplation. As the lawsuit was finally filed, Thomas felt a weight lift off his shoulders, but it was quickly replaced by a different kind of heaviness, an anxiety that simmered beneath the surface. He awaited Marcus's reaction, wondering how his son would respond to the news that their fractured relationship was now being examined under the harsh light of legality. The thought sent a chill down his spine, and he found himself often staring out the window, watching the leaves fall from the trees, their vibrant colors dulled by the impending winter. Then one evening, as dusk settled over Maplewood, Thomas's phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Marcus. His heart raced as he opened the message, anxiety coiling tight in his chest. I need to talk. Can we meet? Thomas stared at the screen, uncertainty flooding his mind. Was this the moment he had been waiting for, or merely a prelude to more pain? Taking a deep breath, he glanced at the photo of Margaret that still graced the wall, her smile a reminder of what family meant. Of course, he typed back, his fingers trembling slightly. When and where? As he pressed send, he felt a mix of fear and hope swirling inside him. The confrontation was coming, and with it, the chance for resolution, or perhaps more heartache. But Thomas knew one thing for certain. He would face whatever lay ahead with the same resilience he had summoned to file the lawsuit. It was time to confront the shadows that had crept into their lives, to fight for the love that still flickered in the corners of their fractured relationship. And maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to each other. The autumn wind whistled through the trees, sending a cascade of crimson and gold leaves spiraling to the ground. With each gust, Thomas Grant felt another layer of his resolve flake away, revealing the soft, vulnerable core beneath. He stood at his kitchen window, the familiar scent of freshly brewed coffee mingling with the dampness of the morning air, and gazed out at the unkempt yard. The grass was overgrown, a stark contrast to the manicured lawns of his neighbors, a testament to his neglect in recent weeks. He had been avoiding the outside world, cocooned in his silence, but now the thought of Marcus's impending visit loomed large in his mind. The weight of the lawsuit sat heavily on his chest, a tangible reminder of the chasm that had formed between them. In the days since he filed the papers, the silence had been deafening, interrupted only by the whispers of his own thoughts. Marcus had reached out, wanting to talk. The message had been simple, yet it rattled Thomas to his core. "Dad, can we meet? I need to explain." The words echoed through his mind, taunting him with the promise of understanding, while simultaneously igniting a tempest of anxiety. What could he possibly say? What could he hear that would change the course of their fractured relationship? He took a deep breath, filling his lungs with the crisp autumn air, and turned away from the window. It was time to face the reality of their situation. He poured himself a cup of coffee, the warmth of the mug grounding him. The bitter taste was a reminder of how life had turned. What once brought him comfort now felt like a cruel joke. As he sat at the table, his eyes fell upon the empty chair across from him, the one that had once been filled with laughter and conversation. Memories danced within his mind. The sound of Marcus's youthful laughter, the shared stories over Sunday breakfast, the way they would discuss everything and nothing at all. It was a time when their bond felt unbreakable, before the shadows of greed and betrayal tainted their connection. With a shaky hand, Thomas reached for his phone, staring at the screen as if it held the answers to all his questions. He hesitated, his thumb hovering over the message he had received. What would he say? The anger still simmered beneath the surface, a hot tide that threatened to pull him under. Yet, somewhere amid the tumult, the flicker of hope remained. Hope that perhaps this meeting could bridge the gap that had formed. "Dad!" The voice startled him. He looked up to see Linda, his attorney, standing at the threshold of the kitchen, her expression a mix of concern and determination. She wore her usual button-up shirt, with her blazer draped over one arm, exuding the confidence that had drawn him to her in the first place. "I thought I'd find you here, Linda," he replied, attempting to mask the tumult in his heart. "I didn't expect you so soon. I wanted to discuss the lawsuit before you meet with Marcus." She walked over, her heels click-clacking against the wooden floor, and sat down across from him. "How are you holding up?" He shrugged, his eyes drifting back to the window. "I'm not sure. It feels like everything is spiraling out of my control." "Understandable." Her voice was steady, a lighthouse in the storm. "This is a lot to process. But meeting with him could change the course of this situation. It might be an opportunity to address the root of the problem, his actions and your feelings about them." Thomas frowned, the weight of her words settling heavily on his shoulders. "What if he tries to manipulate me again? What if he doesn't take responsibility? Then you prepare yourself for that." She leaned forward, her gaze piercing through his defenses. "But you also need to consider that this is your chance to reclaim the narrative. You have the power here, Thomas. It's not just about the lawsuit. It's about setting the terms of your relationship moving forward." He swallowed hard, the knot in his throat tightening. "You make it sound so easy." "It's not easy, but it's necessary." Linda's voice softened. "You're not just fighting for your possessions. You're fighting for your dignity, your right to be heard. You deserve that regardless of what Marcus has done." As her words washed over him, a flicker of determination ignited in Thomas's chest. The thought of confronting Marcus, of standing firm in his convictions, began to take shape in his mind. The anger was still there, but now it was accompanied by a burgeoning sense of empowerment. Perhaps this meeting could be more than just an exchange of words. It could be the catalyst for change, a turning point for both father and son. The kettle whistled from the stove, cutting through the tension in the air. Thomas rose to pour another cup of coffee, the steam rising like a gentle reminder of warmth amidst the chill of his thoughts. As he returned to the table, he found Linda watching him, her expression both encouraging and expectant. "Have you thought about what you want to say to him?" she asked. He paused, the question hanging between them like a fragile thread. "I want him to understand the weight of what he's done. Those albums, they weren't just pictures to me. They were memories, moments frozen in time. Losing them felt like losing her all over again." Linda nodded, her eyes sympathetic. "Then tell him that. Let him see the impact of his actions. It's not just about the material loss. It's about the emotional devastation." A silence fell over them, thick with unspoken truths. Thomas could feel the tension coiling within him, a mixture of fear and anticipation. He thought of Marcus, his son, once a bright light in his life, now a shadow of disappointment. The thought of confronting him was daunting, yet liberating. "Okay," he said, a newfound clarity settling in his voice. I'll tell him everything." Linda smiled, a sense of pride flickering in her eyes. "Good. Just remember to stay focused on your feelings. Don't let him deflect or distract you." As the clock ticked steadily in the background, Thomas felt the weight of the day settle around him. The meeting would take place in just a few hours, and he was filled with a mix of determination and trepidation. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. "Thank you, Linda," he said, his voice steadier now. "I appreciate your support." "Always," she replied, standing up and smoothing her blazer. "Just remember, you're not alone in this. You have the right to fight for what's yours, both legally and emotionally." As she left the kitchen, Thomas felt a flicker of hope ignite within him. He had spent too long feeling like a victim of circumstances, allowing Marcus's actions to dictate his feelings. Today he would reclaim his voice. Today he would confront the man who had betrayed him, and perhaps, just perhaps, they could find a way back to each other. The sun hung low in the sky as Thomas prepared for the meeting, its golden rays casting a warm glow over the kitchen. He looked around, taking in the familiar space, the chipped table, the worn-out chairs, the memories that lingered in every corner. They were remnants of a life once filled with laughter but still echoed with the promise of hope. As he stepped outside, the chill of the autumn air wrapped around him like a shroud, but he refused to let it seep into his bones. He would face Marcus today, not as a defeated man but as a father determined to reclaim his dignity. The leaves crunched beneath his feet, a symphony of change that mirrored the transformation brewing inside him. With each step toward the meeting place, Thomas felt the weight of the past lift, replaced by a renewed sense of purpose. He would speak his truth, and no matter the outcome, he would emerge resolute, ready to navigate the complexities of love and betrayal that had come to define their relationship. As he approached the park where they had agreed to meet, he could see Marcus in the distance, his figure outlined against the vibrant backdrop of autumn foliage. The sight stirred a mixture of emotions within Thomas: love, anger, disappointment, and hope. Today was not just about confronting the past. It was about forging a new path forward, one that could lead to understanding and healing. With a deep breath, Thomas stepped into the future, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The late afternoon sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the familiar streets of Maplewood. Thomas Grant stood by the window of his modest living room, his heart a tumultuous storm of anxiety and anticipation. He watched as the leaves, now a patchwork quilt of gold and crimson, danced lazily in the brisk autumn breeze. Each swirl and rustle outside mirrored the knot in his stomach, a reminder of the conversation that loomed ahead. A faint chime of the doorbell jolted him from his reverie. Marcus was here. Thomas felt a rush of conflicting emotions: disappointment, anger, and a hesitant glimmer of hope. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for the encounter. It was time to confront the betrayal that had cut so deeply, time to bridge the chasm that had widened between them. As he opened the door, Thomas was struck by the sight of his son. Marcus stood there, his shoulders hunched slightly, a nervous energy radiating from him. He wore a thin layer of bravado, but the tremor in his voice gave away his uncertainty. "Hey, Dad, can we talk?" "Yeah, come in." Thomas stepped aside, allowing Marcus to enter the home that had once been filled with laughter and warmth, now tinged with an unshakable sadness. The familiar scent of age would envelop them both as they settled into the living room, the once comfortable space now feeling like a battleground. The air was thick with unspoken words, and Thomas could sense the weight of his son's presence. "About the photo albums," Marcus started, his voice faltering. "I didn't think it would mean that much to you. They were just old pictures. Just old pictures." The phrase struck Thomas like a slap. He had spent countless hours flipping through those albums, reliving moments that had defined their family. "They weren't just old pictures, Marcus. They were memories, pieces of our lives," he replied, his tone more composed than he felt. "Do you understand what you did?" A flicker of something, shame, perhaps, crossed Marcus's face. "I was just trying to, I don't know, clear out the clutter," he stammered. "I thought you'd want to move on." "Move on?" Thomas echoed, incredulous. "You think I can just erase the past? That's not how it works." He paused, feeling the sharp edge of anger soften slightly. "You didn't just throw out albums. You threw out our history, our connection." Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his seat, the tension palpable. "I get it, okay? But I was trying to help. You're always talking about needing to let go of things, to live in the present." "Living in the present doesn't mean disregarding the past," Thomas said, his voice rising slightly. "Those albums held moments of joy, of love, things that can't just be replaced by the latest trends or material possessions. You need to understand that." The silence that followed was heavy, each tick of the clock on the wall echoing the distance between them. Thomas could feel the anger bubbling beneath the surface, but he fought to keep it in check. He needed to convey his feelings without pushing his son further away. "Marcus," he began, softer this time, "I don't want to fight. I want you to understand why this hurts me so much. Your mother, she cherished those memories. They were her way of holding onto her past. And now, without them, it feels like a part of her is gone again." Marcus looked away, his gaze falling to the floor as if the weight of his father's words had anchored him in place. "I didn't think about it like that," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. I thought it was time to move on." "Moving on doesn't mean forgetting," Thomas insisted, his heart aching with the need for Marcus to see beyond his own perspective. "Life is a tapestry of experiences, and those albums were threads that held our family together. You can't just cut them out because they don't fit your idea of what we should be now." For a moment, the room was shrouded in a thick silence, the kind that drapes over conversations like a heavy blanket. Thomas could see the wheels turning in his son's mind, the conflict between the man he had become and the boy he once was. "Maybe I didn't think it through," Marcus finally said, looking up to meet Thomas's eyes. "But Dad, it's not just about the albums. I feel like you're stuck in the past. You talk about your memories like they're all that matters. But what about the future? What about us?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. Thomas felt a surge of frustration. "What about us?" he repeated, the bitterness creeping into his voice. "You're the one who threw away our connection without a second thought. You think that just because you don't value those memories, they aren't worth anything to me?" "I'm trying to be practical," Marcus shot back, his voice rising. "I don't want to live in the past. I want to build something new, something better. But you keep holding on to things that only weigh you down. Is that what this is about? Is this your way of trying to make me let go of your mother?" Thomas challenged, feeling the floodgates of emotion opening. Because all I see is a son who doesn't understand the depth of what he's lost. The air crackled with tension as Marcus clenched his fists, his frustration boiling over. You think I don't understand? I lost her too, Dad. But I'm trying to move forward, to make a life for myself. I can't do that if I'm constantly reminded of what's gone. Thomas's heart sank at the raw pain in Marcus's voice, a reflection of his own. Suddenly, the distance between them felt insurmountable, an abyss filled with misunderstandings and grief. Yet, beneath the anger, Thomas sensed a flicker of vulnerability in his son. Maybe we're both lost, then, Thomas said quietly, the fight draining from him. Maybe we both need to find a way to move forward together. But I can't do it if you refuse to acknowledge the past. Marcus's expression softened, as if the walls he had built around himself were beginning to crack. I don't want to lose you too, Dad, he admitted, his voice trembling. I thought that by moving on, I could help you. Moving on doesn't mean leaving things behind, Marcus. Thomas took a deep breath, the weight of his own emotions pressing down on him. It means carrying them with you, learning from them. I want you to learn from me, from us. Thomas's words hung in the air, heavy with significance. He watched as Marcus's expression shifted, the anger giving way to something deeper. Regret, perhaps, or a longing for connection. It was a small step, but one that Thomas hoped could bridge the gap between them. I'm sorry, Marcus murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't mean to hurt you. I thought I was helping. In that moment, Thomas saw the boy he had raised, the child who had once looked at him with wonder and admiration. We all make mistakes, son, he said gently. But it's what we do after that matters. We have to find a way to heal together, not apart. Tears glistened in Marcus's eyes, and Thomas felt a pang of hope. This was not the end. It was a beginning, a chance to reclaim what had been lost. The photo albums may have been gone, but there was still time to create new memories, to build a stronger foundation for their relationship. Can we try? Marcus asked, his voice cracking with emotion. Can we start over? Thomas nodded, a sense of determination swelling within him. Yes, let's start over. Together. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm golden glow over Maplewood, Thomas felt the weight of the past slowly lifting. He knew there would be challenges ahead, but for the first time in a long while, he felt a flicker of hope. Together, they would navigate the complexities of their relationship, one step at a time. The sun was barely a whisper of warmth behind the heavy clouds that loomed over Maplewood as Thomas Grant sat at the kitchen table, his fingers tracing the grain of the aged wood beneath them. It was the same table where countless family dinners had been shared, laughter echoing off the walls, and stories woven into the fabric of their lives. Now, however, it felt like a hollow space, a stage stripped of its actors, leaving only shadows of memories. He could still see the way Marcus had looked at him across this very table just a few days ago. Eyes filled with defiance, shoulders hunched as if bracing against a storm. Their confrontation had cracked the veneer of their relationship, revealing the deep fissures of resentment and misunderstanding that had been festering for years. The weight of unspoken words hung thick in the air, suffocating in its intensity. Thomas sighed, the sound escaping his lips like a soft prayer. He had hoped that their meeting would lead to healing, but instead, it seemed to have opened a chasm wider than he had feared. Marcus had promised to consider his father's words, but Thomas could still feel the lingering uncertainty in the air. Would his son truly reflect on their past, or was it merely lip service, a way to placate the old man without actually confronting the truth? He glanced out the window, where the crisp autumn air rustled the leaves, sending them spiraling to the ground like the remnants of his hopes. The vibrant hues of orange and gold contrasted sharply with the gray skies above, a reminder that change was inevitable, even when it felt unwelcome. Thomas knew he had to act. The lawsuit loomed over him, an undeniable choice he had made not just out of anger but as a means of reclamation. As the morning dragged on, he felt the familiar weight of a decision pressing down on him. He picked up his phone and dialed Linda's number, the attorney who had become a lifeline in the tumult of his emotions. The phone rang twice before her voice, calm and steady, broke through the uncertainty. "Thomas, how are you holding up?" she asked, warmth infusing her tone. "I'm still here," he replied, forcing a chuckle that felt foreign on his tongue. "Just trying to make sense of everything." "I understand. Have you given any more thought to the lawsuit? This isn't just about the albums, is it?" "No, it's not," he admitted, the truth spilling out like an old wound reopened. "It's about Marcus and how far we've drifted. I want him to understand what he's thrown away, not just the albums but the memories, the legacy. It feels like he's trying to erase everything." "Have you spoken to him since your last meeting?" "We exchanged messages, mostly small talk. I don't know if he's really listening," Thomas confessed, rubbing his temples as if he could massage away the tension. "I just want him to see how much those albums meant. They weren't just photographs. They were our lives, Linda." "Then perhaps the lawsuit is a necessary step," she suggested, her voice steady and reassuring. "It might just be the catalyst for him to truly confront what he's done. But you must be prepared for the fallout." Thomas felt a shiver of apprehension at her words. He had already seen the damage laid bare between them. Could he withstand more? "I know. I'm ready to stand my ground. But I can't help but wonder if there's still a chance to mend things without all this." "Only you can decide that, Thomas. Just remember, taking a stand doesn't mean you're closing the door on reconciliation. It might just open a different one." He hung up with a heavy heart, the conversation swirling in his mind like the autumn leaves outside. As the day wore on, he found himself pacing through the house, each step echoing the conflict within him. The walls seemed to close in, memories flickering at the edges of his mind like candle flames, illuminating the good times he had shared with Marcus. That evening, he returned to the worn leather chair in the corner of his living room, the one that had been his sanctuary through countless nights of solitude. He picked up the old photo album that had survived the purge, its cover faded but sturdy, a testament to the resilience of memory. As he turned the pages, the familiar scent of aged paper filled the air, transporting him back to sun-drenched summers and laughter that danced through the air like melodies. There was a photograph of Marcus as a boy, his face smeared with chocolate cake after a birthday party, eyes wide with the joy of being surrounded by friends. Thomas couldn't help but smile, the image a balm to his aching heart. The memories were a reminder that beneath the layers of hurt, there was still love, a fragile thread that connected them, despite everything that had transpired. The following day, Thomas made a decision. He would file the lawsuit. It felt like a leap into the unknown, but he believed it was necessary. He wanted Marcus to face the consequences of his actions, to truly understand the impact of his choices. Perhaps it would light a fire in him, a spark of realization that would bridge the gap between them. As he prepared to meet with Linda to formalize the papers, he felt a flicker of determination ignite within him. The crisp autumn air brushed against his skin when he stepped outside, invigorating and sharp, as if the world itself was urging him forward. He had spent too long in the shadows of his own despair, and now it was time to reclaim his narrative, to assert his right to be heard in a world that felt increasingly dismissive of his existence. The meeting with Linda was straightforward, filled with legal jargon that felt distant yet empowering. She guided him through the process, her confidence bolstering his resolve. As he signed the papers, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders, a release that had been long overdue. But as he left her office, a new anxiety gnawed at him. What would Marcus think? Would this act of defiance push his son further away? Or would it finally compel him to confront the reality of their fractured relationship? That evening, as dusk settled over Maplewood, Thomas found himself standing at the edge of his yard, watching the last rays of sunlight bathe the neighborhood in a warm glow. It was beautiful, yet bittersweet, a reminder of the life he had built and the family he had cherished. He closed his eyes, letting the cool evening breeze wash over him, and for a moment, he felt a flicker of hope. In the stillness, he whispered a silent plea to the universe, a wish for understanding, for healing. He wanted Marcus to see the truth, to recognize the love that had always been present, even in the midst of their turmoil. The days that followed were filled with a mix of anticipation and dread. Thomas often found himself checking his phone, half hoping for a message from Marcus, yet fearing what it might contain. The lawsuit was a shadow looming over them, a reality that could either fracture their relationship further or serve as the catalyst for change. Finally, on a rainy Saturday afternoon, as fat droplets pattered against the windows, the tension reached a boiling point. Thomas received a text from Marcus. A simple, "Can we talk?" His heart raced. It was a small invitation, yet it held the weight of possibility. Would this be the moment they would confront the truth of their estrangement, or merely another round of avoidance? With a deep breath, Thomas responded, "Yes, I'd like that. When and where?" As he awaited Marcus's reply, the storm outside mirrored the tempest within him. The rain poured down, a relentless cascade, but he felt a flicker of resolve ignite in his chest. No matter the outcome, he was ready to face whatever came next. He was no longer just a man haunted by loss. He was a father determined to reclaim his voice, to bridge the divide, even if it meant walking through the storm. The late afternoon sun hung low in the sky, casting an amber glow over Maplewood that felt both beautiful and haunting. Thomas stood by his front window, the familiar view now tinged with shadows of uncertainty. The crisp autumn air drifted through the open window, carrying with it the scent of fallen leaves and damp earth, but he barely noticed. His mind was consumed with the impending meeting with Marcus, a confrontation that felt like a storm brewing on the horizon. He picked up his phone, its cool surface a reminder of the cold distance that had grown between them. Just days ago, he had filed the lawsuit against his own son, a decision that felt both empowering and agonizing. The weight of the photographs lost, the laughter and milestones captured forever in those albums, pressed heavily on his heart. Each image had been a thread in the tapestry of their lives, and now, with Marcus's actions, those threads lay frayed and scattered. "Thomas!" Linda's voice broke into his thoughts, pulling him back from the edge of his turbulent emotions. She had arrived earlier than expected, her sharp professionalism a welcome distraction from the chaos of his mind. "I just spoke to Marcus. He wants to meet tonight." "Tonight?" Thomas echoed, his voice barely above a whisper. The thought of facing Marcus again stirred a maelstrom of feelings. Anger, sadness, and a flicker of hope. "What did he say?" "He's remorseful but still defensive," she answered, settling into the chair across from him. "He insists he didn't mean to hurt you. He believes he was acting in your best interest." Linda's gaze was steady, a grounding force as Thomas wrestled with the turmoil inside. "But it's clear he wants to talk. This could be a turning point." Thomas exhaled slowly, feeling the tension in his shoulders release, if only slightly. "A turning point," he mused, the phrase echoing in his head. "Or just another round of the same arguments." He glanced outside, where a couple of children were playing, their laughter ringing out through the autumn air, blissfully unaware of the darker currents that swirled in the lives of adults. "Perhaps," Linda said, her tone inviting him to reflect. "But maybe it's time to see where this conversation leads. You've both been walking around this issue for too long." She leaned forward, her dark hair falling slightly forward, emphasizing her earnestness. "You need to express how you feel about everything, the albums, the trust fund, your relationship. It's an opportunity, Thomas." His heart raced as he considered her words. He had been rehearsing his speech in his mind, each point a carefully carved stone in the foundation of his argument. But now, the prospect of a raw and honest conversation filled him with both dread and anticipation. "What if it doesn't go the way I hope?" he asked, vulnerability creeping into his voice. "Then you'll know, and that knowledge will guide you forward," she replied, her confidence unwavering. "You deserve clarity, and so does Marcus." As the sun dipped further below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of violet and indigo, Thomas felt a flicker of determination ignite within him. He could no longer allow the bitterness of betrayal to consume him. It was time to confront the past and the present head-on. The doorbell rang, a sharp sound cutting through the thickening silence. Thomas's heart skipped a beat, and he exchanged a glance with Linda, who nodded encouragingly. He rose and walked toward the door, each step heavy with the weight of unspoken words. When he opened it, there stood Marcus, his face a mixture of uncertainty and resolve. The shadows of the evening framed him, adding a layer of vulnerability to his posture. Thomas felt a pang in his chest, a reminder of the boy he once knew, the son he had raised, full of dreams and potential. "Dad," Marcus said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Can we talk?" "Come in," Thomas replied, stepping aside, his heart racing as he gestured for him to enter. The living room felt smaller than usual, the air thick with tension. Linda remained seated, her presence a silent anchor as they all settled into the uneasy silence. Marcus took a deep breath, his eyes darting around the room, landing on the empty space where the photo albums had once proudly stood. He started, but the words faltered. Thomas could see the struggle behind his son's eyes, as if he were wrestling with demons of his own. "Why did you throw them out?" Thomas asked, his voice steady, though the weight of his question hung heavily in the air. Marcus flinched, his expression tightening. "I thought I was helping you, Dad. Those albums were just clutter. You were always saying how you wanted to simplify your life." Thomas felt a rush of frustration. "Simplifying my life doesn't mean erasing my memories, Marcus. Those albums held our family's history. Your mother's laughter, our vacations, the birthdays, the moments that made us who we are." The heat of his words lingered in the space between them, but Marcus seemed unfazed, as if the truth had been lost on him. "I didn't think it would matter that much," Marcus replied, his voice tinged with defensiveness. "I thought you'd want to let go of the past. Letting go doesn't mean throwing away the pieces that make us whole." Thomas shot back, the frustration spilling over into anger. "You can't just decide what's important for me. You didn't even ask." Marcus's face flushed with a mixture of shame and anger. "I did it for you, Dad. I wanted you to move on, to find new things to fill your life." "New things?" Thomas interrupted, disbelief coloring his tone. "What could possibly replace the memories of your mother? Those albums were my way of keeping her alive. You don't understand anything about what I've been through." Silence enveloped them, thick and suffocating. Thomas could see the hurt in Marcus's eyes, the realization of the chasm that had opened between them. For a moment, the anger subsided, replaced by the quiet weight of shared grief. "I'm sorry," Marcus said, his voice cracking. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I just thought. I don't know what I thought." He looked down, his hands fidgeting nervously as if trying to grasp the right words that eluded him. "I've been trying to fix things between us, but I keep making it worse." "Fix things?" Thomas echoed, the bitterness creeping back into his voice. "You think throwing away my memories is fixing things?" "I was wrong," Marcus said, his voice stronger now, infused with a hint of determination. "I admit I messed up, but I don't want to keep living like this, Dad. I want to understand you better, to understand why these moments mean so much. I want to be part of your life, not apart from it." The sincerity of Marcus's plea struck Thomas like a bolt of lightning, illuminating the darkness that had enveloped their relationship. Here was the son he had once known, the boy who had looked up to him with admiration and love. Beneath the surface of anger and disappointment, there was a yearning for connection, for understanding. "I filed the lawsuit," Thomas admitted, his voice calmer now, though still quaking with emotion. "Not just for the albums, but because I wanted you to see the consequences of your actions. I wanted you to feel the weight of what you did." "Consequences," Marcus echoed, the word hanging in the air like a bitter aftertaste. "I get it. I really do. I just wanted you to know that I'm trying to make it right. Can we start over? Can we talk about those memories together?" A flicker of hope ignited in Thomas's chest, battling against the shadows of betrayal. "You want to talk?" he asked, his voice quivering with the weight of possibility. "Yeah," Marcus said, his eyes earnest, pleading. "I want to hear about Mom, about the stories in those albums. I want to understand what they meant to you." Thomas felt the walls he had built around himself begin to crack, the warmth of longing seeping through the fractures. Perhaps this was the turning point Linda had mentioned, a chance to rebuild the connection they had lost. "Then let's talk," he said, his voice steady. "Let's start there." As the sun dipped below the horizon, leaving behind a canvas of twilight, Thomas felt a flicker of warmth return to his heart. The road ahead would be difficult, filled with the jagged edges of their past. But for the first time in a long while, he felt a glimmer of hope. Together, perhaps they could begin to stitch the pieces of their lives back together, one memory at a time.